Improvisation is what we do, isn't it?
That's right.
That's
That's
right.
right.
All right, so let me open up for you. We welcome Deborah Wilcox to this wonderful NIAPRS webinar. My name is Ruth Cologne Wagner. I'm Director of Training and Development here at NIAPRS. And I work with Dr. Wilcox on our Cultural Competency Committee. So I feel like I know her and her work really well. And I just want to really do a formal introduction of Dr. Wilcox. But before I get that done, just some housekeeping. As you all know, if anybody's here for social work, you know, LMSW or LCSW, licensed mental health counseling, as well as CPRP. If you're here and hoping to get any CEUs, we do provide CEUs for those 3 professions I just mentioned. And there are a couple of caveats that come with that. First of all, you have to be here essentially from mostly the beginning, and you have to be here through the end. And our Zoom systems checks attendance. And then there's another thing we need for you to do is to be able to fill out an evaluation form. Now, of course, we want everyone to fill out the evaluation form. And once you get it, the link, you could say, you know, no CEs needed. We would love everybody's feedback. But specifically for those of you looking for CEs, you must complete the evaluation. And it's on a Google form, and you will get the link probably no less than 24 hours after the end of this webinar. And then you have 48 hours to actually submit it back to us. And it's just completing it, pressing done, and we get it immediately. So that's sort of the work around all of that. In terms of your communication with us, this is the webinar platform. So if you were here this morning, you noticed that we had a little bit of back and forth in terms of meeting certain people on the screen, which means most of you are not, and that we can't hear you. So please highly interact with us using the chat box. And we're going to have, I think his name is Brian, when he comes on board, he's going to support the chat box once I end up having to leave at 1 o'clock. But this webinar is 75 minutes. So here Eastern time, it is 12:09 p.m. and you will be here in this room together with Dr. Wilcox until 1:15 Eastern Standard Time. Now I'm going to do an introduction. And I have to read it because and it's really small, so my face might get really close to the screen, so please forgive me. Dr. Wilcox, she is the founder and chief executive officer of an organization she created called Confluency Consultations and Associates, a consultancy enterprise that provides comprehensive organizational development and health and wellness coaching services. She has consulted with over 100 organizations, providing strategic planning, workforce development, professional development, multicultural competency, and supporting organizations and overall workplace wellness. The primary mission of her consultancy is to integrate multicultural competency into organizations and community life that bring people together across cultural differences to build healthy and productive relationships. And just a little bit more after that is that Dr. Wilcox has been on the NIAPRS Cultural Competency Committee of the board since 2014. And in that time has provided our organization with a wealth of support and information and has only enhanced our work. She actually, I just found out, has started or will begin supporting our policy committee. So that's absolutely wonderful. And to further show how much we love Dr. Wilcox, she actually earned the NIAPRS Quincy Boykin Award back in, is that 2004 or 14?
20.
Oh, 2020, my apologies. Okay, so I definitely wrote 2004, that's an error, but 2020, and that's for inspiring and contributing to recovery and integration in the recovery movement of the nation, not just New York and not just NIAPRS. And you know, Dr. Wilcox, there's so much more to your wonderful work, but I think let's leave it there because we are just ready for you to jump on in.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ruth, for that introduction. You know, I feel like we're all in community. I've been involved with NIASPRIS now since about 2014. And I just want to give a shout out to NIASPRIS. The New York Association for Psychiatric Rehabilitation Services has been a bedrock, a touchstone for the recovery movement in this country, not only in the state of New York, but also in the United States and international, keeping that torch alive for how important it is that we build community and that we bring people together to support mental health, wellness, and recovery. And more importantly, that peers be centered in their own wellness and recovery, which is most important. And that's what's going to be central to our webinar today. So I'd like to give everyone a sincere welcome. I wish I could see you, but I can't. But let's, in spirit, we can connect. I want to introduce also Julianne Sellers, who I've been working very closely with, who's the program director for a wonderful organization out of Kansas called the Poetry for Personal Power. We have been working together implementing story circles here in Denver, Colorado with the P3, we call it P3. When you hear P3, that means Poetry for Personal Power, and also in Kansas. So I'm gonna let Juliana introduce herself. We may have other members that come on. If not, we're gonna move forward because we wanna give you a taste of how the story circles are actually ran, but we'll be able to do that. So Julianne, I'm going to turn it over to you and whatever you'd like to say about, P3 and your involvement in Story Circle.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Deborah. So like Deborah was saying, I am the Director of Programming for Poetry for Personal Power. We're based out of Kansas City, Missouri. We work in Missouri, Kansas, and Colorado. But we actually met Deborah and got connected with her story circles through Neighbors. So we're very grateful for that. And we've been helping Deborah to implement story circles in Colorado for the last few years. I even have my talking stick here. Deborah, I wanted to let you know that. And story circles are just an amazing way to bring people together to help us be human together. I'll put a little bit more contact information for Poetry for Personal Power in the chat. We're actually hosting our second annual Rite of Joy conference coming up in October. So I'll put a little more information about that in the chat. And as we have 18 members join, hopefully they'll be able to join in. But I'm excited to be here and happy to continue to work with Deborah in this important work.
Absolutely. Are there other Poetry for Personal Power persons in the webinar at this time?
The only one that I've seen is our brand new program manager, and Jenny Catlin, and she's just gonna kind of sit back and familiarize herself with story circles, because she hasn't had as much experience with that yet. But as I see anyone else come in, I'll let everyone know.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Juliana, because I was going to ask you to do that. So, we're always working as a team. Well, absolutely. Without further ado, let me say a little bit about my involvement in learning about the importance of peer support in supporting holistic health, whole person well-being. And I started working with a team in Ohio. We had a large grant from the Ohio Department of Mental Health, because a lot of agencies in the state of Ohio were asking, how do we shift our culture from a medical model culture to a culture that supports peer support, generates peer support and wellness and recovery? So Southeast Behavioral Health, which is one of the largest mental health agencies in the state of Ohio, received the contract, and we were able to put together a team, a wonderful team across age, class, sexual orientation, ethnicity, peers, providers. A small group of us begin to start to work on our own conceptualizations of multicultural competency, how we conceived recovery, our perspectives around recovery, who we were in this work. And we went around the different agencies and learned about how they were implementing their work and begin to snowball, which you would say a cross-pollination of creative ideas to bring wellness into the agencies. It was the most compelling research. We did that research from 2006 to 2013, where we were able to have agencies start to teach one another. And each agency, we did 23 agencies in the state of Ohio and 2 psychiatric hospitals, North Coast Behavioral Health in Toledo, and also the hospital in Cincinnati. And we worked very closely with the Cincinnati Recovery Center. They were beginning at that time in 2006 to put together a recovery center. So if you go online and look at recoverycenter.org, you'll see Cincinnati, they're doing remarkable work in their community. So I want to give a shout out to the work we've been able to do in Ohio. We collected data, the University of Toledo crunched our data, and we trained over 3,000 peers and providers in holistic health and wellness implementation. And agencies begin to implement this work in compelling ways, in their own creative ways that was the best fit for their communities. So moving forward, this is a graphic that was drawn by one of the peers in the Ohio work. We call it Ohio Wellness Management and Recovery was the name of the Coordinating Center of Excellence. That's what we formulated to look at all the tenets necessary to support agency and cultural organizational change, as well as how do we allow spaces within agencies who are delivering mental health agencies to bring peers and providers together in collaboration. So take a moment and look at this graphic and just reflect, what do you see? I always show this particular graphic. It was drawn by a peer that said, this is how the medical system has made me feel. And so as a result of that, I always show this because this is one of our biggest barriers, is how do we foster, support, and generate shared power and care as we deliver mental health services? How do we take the hierarchy structures out of care and come together in partnership and collaboration? Because we all want to have that open communication with our peers, whether it be individuals in behavioral health, like our social workers, our therapists, our psychiatrists, our primary care physicians, any of our providers. We want to have a collaborative communication partnership so we can co-construct a plan for wellness. One of the things that the traditional medical model has fostered that has created a lot of disconnection and fragmentation, and has created a lot of trauma, recreated because of the top-down hierarchy relationships, as opposed to, the collaborative relationship that I was speaking of. No one wants to be relegated to what we call compliance. This is what you must do. We want to have voice and choice, and that's what peer support generates. It allows the dignity of both the provider and the peer to be in collaboration to co-create a wellness, a whole person plan for recovery. So whatever notes that you may have moving forward, just write them down, because we're going to have opportunity for some Q&A. And Juliana, did you have something you'd like to share? And feel free to jump right in.
I just had a comment. We got a message sent directly to us as panelists. Jose commented he sees the need for equal communication and that relationship between peers in the medical system. And yeah, as someone else commented, they see the power differential. So yeah, this dynamic where we don't feel like equal partners in our own care. So I just wanted to insert that before we continue on. Thank you.
Yeah, and feel free to continue to do that, Juliana. Okay. Because that way we can infuse the voices of everybody that's participating today, and we build community. Thank you for those comments. Keep those comments coming in the chat, because the reason we're doing this is so that we can be influential in our respective communities to start to build the kind of systems that supports recovery and builds whole person wellness and well-being. So thank you. So let's talk a little bit about story circles. Story circles came out of some of the work that I had gotten exposed to in the state of Ohio with the Ohio Management Wellness and Recovery Initiative. And we did everything in group process. I'm a real group person because I think that, I know that collective learning is more powerful because you have the opportunity to learn from so many different people. And at the same time, you're building relationships and you can choose what you need to learn at that moment in time to support your recovery. So story circles were designed to take the hierarchy out of that provider. We don't even like to use the word client. You know, we're trying to change our language. We're trying to say, hey, people, all of us need to be well. All of us are working on our well-being every single day. So it's provider and a recipient of a service coming together and co-creating. So that relationship is so important. So story circles bring people together in community across cultural differences to share life experiences about what matters to them and their communities. Story circles also help people to listen deeply to one another, build trust, and discover common ground, and to identify shared values. And so the whole movement of multicultural competency in healthcare, the conversations begin to start to heighten in the, I would say, early 80s, and then it started in 90s. And the whole reason for the standards of best practices in healthcare, in both behavior health and allopathic medicine, which I mean where your primary care physicians practice in what you call allopathic medicine, came out of the fact that people were not coming back to therapy. They were not coming and receiving, they were coming to the agencies and not coming back because they felt like they were getting hurt, re-traumatized, or not listened to. That is because there was not any kind of cultural sharing or cultural acknowledgement. So as a result of that, the American Counseling Association, the Association for Psychologists, APA, began to start to think about what we need to put together best practices around cultural competency. And what does that mean? So there was a whole host of research out there about what it means to be a culturally competent practitioner. And so we have all this language about, is it cultural humility? Is it cultural competency? It really doesn't matter. Bottom line, it says what's appropriate for you to support the human dignity of another person. Can you listen to the differences that people bring? We all are different. We all come from multiple cultures, but the idea is to be able, as people who are recipients and also providers, to understand who we are as cultural beings. And once we understand that and embrace that, then we can hear other people differently and respect that. Julianne, did you want to add anything to that?
I just want to say having that permission to be human together, both for peers and providers, is so important, because this construct of power differentials and one person knowing so much more than another person dehumanizes everyone in the interaction. And so it not only is helpful to humanize the peers or the people that we're providing services to, but it's also helpful to humanize the providers as well. And it's a system that creates more wellness all the way around when we recognize the human dignity and just the mutual respect for one another all the way around.
Absolutely. And that's what peer support is all about. We're all peers, regardless if you're a practitioner, a provider. Sometimes we're a provider of services, sometimes we're a recipient of services. So that's the idea of building, authentic community. I like to equate recovery to this concept called becoming. And so I'd like to read this quote to you just briefly. Becoming isn't about arriving somewhere or achieving a certain aim. It's forward motion, a means of evolving, a way to reach continuously toward a better self. So we're all becoming. recovery, we're all in recovery. We're moving toward and from something, and that's the way life is. That's just the way life evolves for all of us. So peer support, I love this particular reflection. It comes from Sherry Mead, who's an intentional peer supporter. I was able to get this quote from her, and it says, in peer support, we come together with the intention of changing our patterns, getting out of stuck places, building relationships that are respectful, mutually responsible, and potentially mutually transforming. We validate each other for our personhood rather than our patienthood. We see each other's behavior through the lens of personal experience rather than through the lens of illness. And that is the whole shift from the medical model to the peer support model. I think Sherry put it real clean in this particular, real clear in this particular comment. So just moving forward, this is some things I know that you all are aware of, but just to kind of lay some more foundation before we move into the get a little bit more granular in Story Circle and Story Circle implementation. But this is all related to the purpose of the Story Circle. 1 in 4 people experience mental illness every year, each year, and it could be even higher, based on the fact that we've had, the heightened epidemic of violence in the United States and what's happening to our children. We have a lot of work to do, and everybody's talking about mental health, mental health. So what does that mean? What does mental health mean is the question. So we all experience anxiety, depression, sometimes schizophrenia and other related illnesses, bipolar. Mental illness is on a continuum, from traumatic experiences all the way through extreme, severe and persistent mental illness, with brain disorder. But all mental illness is not related to a chemical imbalance in the brain. Mental illness, it takes place when we hear about children being killed in the school. I mean, the trauma of that, the stress of that. So it's not a we, they affair. It's really about a community wellness issue. And understand that it slides up and down the continuum, just like our physical health. And there's an integration of physical health and mental health. There is no holistic health and well-being without mental health. Mental health and physical health are integrated. But because we've had such a fragmented medical system, we think it's something different. You go over here for mental health, you go over here primary care for your physical health. It has to be integrated. We're getting there in the United States. Most industrialized countries are way down the line. They're well integrated. We're working on it in the US. So the life expectancy, this is how critical and serious this is. And this statistics even can be shifted at this point. But this is 2006. So persons living with a serious and persistent mental illness died 25 years earlier than a member of the general population. And it probably is around 20 or 21 at this point, which is quite critical. This is a call for the work that we all do. So what is mental health recovery? It's a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. And so the major dimensions that support a life in recovery around health, around home, and purpose, and community, which is the major tenets of recovery. And now we're looking at an expanded aspects of health, and that is the social determinants of health. Housing is fundamental, food access, social support, employment, safety networks. So now that we've had the Affordable Care Act, we're able to broaden our scope. The health is not just going to the doctor when you're ill, but it's everything. All the infrastructure, all the environment impacts our health and well-being. So in the Story Circle, And we were going to do an experiential, but we can't do that right now. But I tell you what, we can do a part 2. We'll talk to Niaspers about that, and we'll do a part 2. But we're going to give you, Julianne and I will co-facilitate this process based on our own experience. What we use in the, I don't know if you can see me, but we use the talking stick. And the talking stick is a symbol, and Julianne has hers too, which is awesome, awesome. We put these together. The talking stick is a symbol of the ritual. And the ritual is a transforming experience. When everyone has a particular belief in a circle, the ritual starts. And so we use this as a symbol of transformation. We use it as a symbol of voice. We use it as a symbol of democracy, a symbol of being able to speak to each other and listen to each other deeply, and to be changed and choose to be changed by what we want to be changed and transformed. Is nobody imposes on anyone, but this talking stick was a way for traditional cultures, Native Americans, Africans, Europeans, all forms of cultures that were in tribal environments, talking about how they were going to continue to survive, to deal with how we're going to have food access, how we're going to have housing, how we're going to initiate our children. So the elders would come together and use the talking stick so they could hear each other and make decisions together collectively. So it's an artifact of democracy. It's an artifact of what we use in story circles of resiliency and building community. Julianne, would you like to say anything about your experience with the talking stick?
Absolutely. Not only is the talking stick a powerful tool that's from our ancestors, but just my experience with using it within story circles is it gives people an opportunity to have the focus on them and them sharing their story. It really facilitates the sharing one at a time. And I think there's something powerful both in the experience of being the one who's witnessed as you're talking and having everyone's attention on you, and in witnessing other people. Some people have never been witnessed in a safe, supportive space in that way. And I think that there's a powerful healing that comes both from being witnessed in that way and from witnessing other people. It's part of the magic that happens within story circles. And I think it's something that we can be grateful for our ancestors passing down to us as a tool. So
Absolutely. So the story circle opens a space for peers and providers to share lived experiences and to hear one another differently. So it's a way of making sure we build those collaborative relationships. We can say we're in partnership, but actually the story circle creates the authentic partnership. And so it's nothing new under the sun. This is what we call in the African-American community a Sankofa moment. With the Sankofa is a time of going back to look at the work of the ancestors and bringing them forward in postmodern society. Sometimes you'll see an Ndinka symbol of a bird flying, the bird flying backwards with an egg in its mouth. Actually flying forward with looking backwards. That's what I want to say, flying forward and bringing the wisdom of the ancestors to the present moment. And that's what the talking stick represents. Going back to what we know creates democracy and civility in our societies, in our communities, in our mental health agencies, creating civility and well-being. So the story circle supports wellness and resilience. The name of the story circle, it's the wellness and recovery story circles is what I assert. It doesn't matter. P3 calls it wellness and resilience because that's what it supports. It supports recovery, and it also supports resilience. So this is the opportunity to for people to gain an awareness of personal trauma and learn how to work through and heal from the impact of those experiences, explore multicultural competency best practices of knowledge, awareness, and skills that support mental health, wellness, and recovery, learn the benefits of achieving a healthy lifestyle, and changes how these behaviors support well-being and sustain mental health, wellness, and recovery. Story circles combat the alienation brought on by stigma of mental illness, restoring personhood, sharing resources, and allow people to tell their stories without feeling like they have to conform to social norms, permits people to focus on strengths and wellness rather than illness. This is so critically important. It's not a traditional teacher learner. It's not like the graphic I showed. It's about everyone sharing their stories, but in the story circle, no one questions the lived experience of anyone else, which is so critically important. Nobody questions, nobody judges it. You just listen. Julianne, do you want to talk about how we've experienced the outcomes? We've collected data on this work. We've been in this work about 4 years now, and the outcome is very compelling. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, I just wanted to share, if Brian B was here, he might share something along the lines of, so often in any kind of medical care or treatment, whether it's mental or physical, we focus on what's wrong with you. And it's powerful sometimes to just focus on what's strong with you. You know, being able to look at, what are my strengths? What are the things that I do well? What are the things that have helped me with recovery, that have helped me be well? And I think not only being able to recognize those things, but being able to share them with other people is really powerful. And we do have data that we've been collecting for several years on how people are just at the beginning of the story circle, and then what may have changed for them by the end of the story circle. And it's really powerful to see those shifts in our participants through the data.
Absolutely. It's a liberating moment for folks to not to have someone tell them what to do, but to really be able to get the what you call good attention from everyone in the group. And believe me, I've seen, and even myself, have had tears because of getting good attention acknowledges you as a person, that you are worthy to be listened to. And sometimes, it's the first time that people have ever gotten good attention. And things that we take for granted. We take good attention for granted, but that's not something to assume. And to watch that kind of transformation occur, and it's something occur in the circle. It's something magical and spiritual that our ancestors left us about the circle. It's very magical. If you have a configuration where you're talking down to people, or you're talking in a kind of classroom style, that's one type of energy. But when you bring a circle together, it's a different type of synergy. It creates the transformation. That's the ritual, the symbol of the talking stick. So it's kind of beyond us. It's the energy of the universe working, and it's kind of it's really like the core of humanity. The circle. It's a mandala. You'll see those symbols all over the world in all cultures. So
I just wanted to note, William shared, those having mental illness within them most often express the need to be heard. And that's so true. Like, where are there non-judgmental places for especially people who are experiencing mental illness to just come and be human and be witnessed and be heard without judgment? And that's a powerful need for everyone, but especially people within those communities may not have that resource open to them a lot of times. And I think not only, like, one story circle is powerful, but there's a cumulative process too. As we continue to come over time, like, it has a kind of a cumulative impact that I've noticed. And beyond just the quantitative data, I love the qualitative data. When we hear people's stories, when people come back and share the impact or the way that they see the world has shifted, or things that have helped them feel more well in their own life. Those are some of my favorite things to hear.
Absolutely. And I really like that idea, your comment. That's what I want to say, Juliana, about cumulative effect, because it builds peer support community. It's not a program. That's one of the things I always say. Let's don't call this a program,
Yes.
but because we have agency language, we say that. I mean, it's just normally that we do that. But it's really about an experience. It's an intervention to promote health and well-being and personhood, and building authentic community. Not just an intellectual cognitive, oh, we got a community here. No, you build relationships because you build trust. Trust is the most compelling aspect of supporting space for recovery. You have to build trust, and that happens. It happens because everybody the ritual is we agree to give each other safety. We agree that whatever is shared in the story circle stays in the story circle. And when the story circle dismantles, you don't discuss anybody's story after the story circle. So we have those kinds of tenets that we use to make sure that everybody stays safe. And
right. There's something powerful in creating intentional space to practice just being and to witness other people being. And I feel like that's part of the magic of the story circle, is creating that intentional space to come together and just be present with each other. So,
absolutely. Yes.
And I do want to acknowledge the comment about they wish that we'll use language that promotes wellness rather than illness. I agree. I've actually come to use the term mental wellness even more so than mental health, because mental health has almost come to mean mental illness in the way that it's been used in our society. And I do think that the language that we use does have an impact. And so becoming more mindful of how we choose to describe these things, I think does have an impact. So I just wanted to thank her for her comment.
Absolutely. And the whole peer support movement, and I say movement, because it can't, it's evolving out of over 50 years of social justice work. And that's what NIASPRS has held the space open. And they have the agency of NIASPRS in every aspect of New York public policy and beyond, to say, let's structure a system that really is just. And that's the ongoing work. Justice is something that has to be ongoing work. And if it wasn't for the whole early movements and the early pioneers, the Julie Chambers and other folks that said nothing about us without us, we would not be able to have this discussion today about how story circles fit in, supporting holistic health, wellness, and recovery. So we have to make sure that we continue to promote peer support and provider and peer relationships in the way we deliver services moving forward. So some of the key elements related to the story circle, because I know that you all want to have an interest, otherwise you wouldn't be on the webinar today, how to do this in your community. Well, one of the things that I had to learn as a provider, and I'm a real group person, but I had to learn how story circles really do help us build relationships across our cultural differences. And we talk about multicultural competency in terms of providers getting in touch with their own who they are as cultural beings, how to put together interventions that are culturally appropriate. How do we interrogate internalized oppressions and trauma, all of those things. But the story circle is all inclusive. It's like a one-stop shop. You get it all in a story circle. And what's so beautiful about it is nobody is in charge. We have facilitators. It's always good. Like right now, Juliana and I are modeling the co-facilitation process. That's what's important. That peers and providers get involved in co-facilitating. So that way you don't have one voice opening the space. Everybody's voice is included, but you have what you call your facilitator leaders who are managing the time, managing the themes, that kind of thing, but they're not like on top of the story circle. They're just on tap to make sure that the process goes well, which is so very important, because what happens a lot of times, people have been so disenfranchised in the medical model that they continue to take a one step down or acquiesce to providers, the doctor, the social worker, the therapist, the case management person. They'll acquiesce. Whatever you tell me to do, I'll do, and so when that acquiescing occurs, they're not really supporting themselves. So there's a lot of damage that has been done, that people still take, a one step down to their providers. They don't know how to be in partnership, nor the providers have been educated to say, I know how to help you manage your life. So they got the one step up. So the one step down and the one step up is not fostering recovery. It's the
Right.
collaboration and partnership.
Right. I think Lamont's comment speaks perfectly to what you were just saying. He says, I always say my doctor wanted to control my health and make me own the illness. So I work on wellness because it starts with we. So it's a valid point. Illness starts with I, wellness starts with we. And honestly, our doctors aren't able to control our health. They can give us advice, they can share their information. Sometimes they can help us with medication that may help or may not, but they should be a consultant in that process. But I feel like changing that paradigm is really important. But I love the idea of wellness starts with we. And he adds, when you take the I from illness and replace it with we, then you get wellness. So
I love it.
For those thoughts. It's very true. None of us were meant to create our wellness alone. We need each other as part of this process. So thank you so much for those thoughts.
Absolutely. That just shows you right there, Julian, how we're always learning. Story circles. Thank you for that. We'll be using that. That's what the power of collective learning. That's why group process is so compelling, because we get a chance to continue to teach each other collectively, bringing creative ideas in the way that we become and the way that we are working on a recovery. So you see on the slide here is real basic, people come together. You all, this is not complex. Story circles are not complex to implement. We have I have the theory of the complex issues that we're dealing with in our societies and the behavioral health needs of individuals and families in our communities and providers. We're at a very dire time now, critical time. This is serious work. And the way you deal with complexity is through simplicity. If you keep it simple, then you can open that we space and start the work. And so that's what Story Circle does. It's not a program, it's a community building personhood model, and relationship is at the center. And the cultural competency comes about because people are coming together from their multiple cultures. They're coming together from multiple lived experiences. And as a result of that, we learn from each other. That's the transforming. That's the relationship building. That's the knowledge, awareness, and skills in culturally appropriate services. So I can't say enough about how Story Circles promote appropriate multicultural services and a competency. But more importantly, it respects the dignity of human differences.
Right, absolutely. We have something from Stan. He's curious to see if this is a concept he can introduce to peer support meetings that he facilitates.
Absolutely. There's no question about that. You'll see some pictures here of the Story Circle group, some of the P3 team. This is where we started together in a church. We've done them in churches. We just opened it up like a couple of Saturdays a month, and people just drop in and we do a Story Circle. And then on the right side, you'll see a group of us and Brian B.
Deborah, you might move to the next slide. We're not seeing the pictures.
You're not seeing the pictures?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know. I did move to the next slide. Can you see that now?
I'm not yet. I don't know about anyone else.
Okay, wow. Let me see here.
The screen I'm seeing says how the story circle supports wellness and resilience.
Okay, all right. Oh, wow. So this is I've gone through several slides since then. So
Okay.
there's a pause here. I don't know. Let me stop the screen share and go back
Okay.
again. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes, now I'm seeing the pictures.
Okay, great, great. But I had a couple other slides. You missed those slides, but we talked through them, some of the key elements of the story circle. And so now we're moving to the pictures. So
Okay.
this is give you a pictorial of some of the story circles in action. Brian B. is a very peer support leader with Poetry for Personal Power, and he's very involved in theater. So one of the things that's really compelling about the story circle in terms of how P3 implements them, they always use the arts. And we use the poetry. We're doing some improvisation right now. Sometimes people just bring affirmations. Sometimes they bring song or instrument. It doesn't matter. But the one on the left, the gentleman plays the flute. Sometimes we just open up with a flute, a song, and it just sets the pace for the energy of the story circle. So during the story circle process, each person in the group, one by one, without interruptions and commentary or questions, shares the recovery, wellness, and resilience story circles. And then we have the talking stick. We just pass it around when you're getting ready to talk. But because of COVID and we had to go pivot to Zoom, we all just made our own story circle, own talking sticks, and just showed them as we were talking. So we just pivoted to a lot of different ways of implementing story circle. But I want you all to know this is very simple, and it's creative, and you can use all kinds of creativity in the story circle. But the main thing is allow people to tell stories about their lived experiences in recovery, and not to take any kind of judgment or discussion about the story circle. The stories, just listen well, and pass the stick to the next person. And you'd be surprised how that energy and synergy starts to create that transformation. Julianne, did you want to say anything about these pieces?
I just think it's great to see the pictures of the people that are involved in the art and the amazing things that people will bring in when they're allowed to share different things. I know I've shared diamond paintings that I've been working on, and various things. And I think it's really helpful to allow people to just share where they are and what helps them create wellness in their own lives. I think we've seen a number of other things in the interest of, honoring people's confidentiality. I won't go into some of those details, but I think it's really powerful to see the things that we witness as we go through and just witness what helps people be supported in their wellness. I'm not sure how much more you have to cover. There are some questions in the chat, but we can come back to those at the end.
Okay.
I do want to make sure we leave time for those.
Yes, we definitely want to do that. And I got myself on the timer, and we'll make sure we keep that time, Juliana. Be mindful of it. You all, and I'm just showing some additional pictures of the story circles. We've implemented them in churches and community-based organizations. The Charge Center is where myself and some other colleagues are very involved. I know Dr. Rios is on this call, Jose Rios. We're very much in partners with the Charge Resource Center here in Denver, and building a strong peer leadership team. The peers are really gearing up to make sure that they start to provide education and to the medical community, because it's time for peers to educate the medical community even more. Peers have been doing that all along. It's time, because one of the things that we recognized, and when not only we recognized, but the data of the wellness management recovery work that we did in the state of Ohio said that providers needed recovery. Nobody is paying attention to the recovery of the provider of services who are working in agencies or veterinary medical model. They have high caseloads and burnout. They don't get listened to. They have to, they have all these people coming in, just like they're working in a factory. They're just burnt out. And so when we start to do the wellness and recovery groups and pivoted into story circles, providers started to work on their wellness and recovery. And peers were supporting providers in doing that. So that's what's important about that collaboration. Everybody gets their needs met.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't want you to think this is a cookie cutter, because you can do this in various types of agencies. We implemented story circles in peer ran agencies, as well as clinical ran agencies, and also in psychiatric hospitals, where the care team, what they call treatment teams, we're trying to change that language. The care teams collaborated with peers and start to do the work inside the hospital. And particularly in Cincinnati is one model, and in Toledo was another model, where when people were released from the hospital, they could go right into the community and to continue to do their wellness and recovery work. And so there was a continuity of care structure and system put in place. And that's what we want to think about when people are in crisis, what happens when, they come out of the hospital. So we're talking about the respite movement, where people can have an intermediary kind of care between the hospital, which is a 72-hour stay, and a respite, and how you have ongoing continued work and care. And the way you do that is within your agency, to be able to build that peer support community and know that you have people who care about your wellness and recovery. Julie, I want to talk a little bit about how you've seen that recovery community being built in your sphere of work in Poetry for Personal Power in Kansas and other areas that you work in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've seen this as we helped implement it with the Eaton senior communities. We've seen it even just with our team as we've tried to bring it into Kansas, like allowing our program managers and our employees to experience story circles regularly, as well as bringing that to a wider community. And it's interesting how sometimes you'll get a core group of people who are coming back on a regular basis, and other times you'll get just new people. And each story circle kind of has its own energy and its own space. And so just the nature of the way that we open our story circles to anyone that wants to come, we get a wider range. And being able to do it on Zoom, like we started doing when we pivoted at the start of COVID, has opened it up to where we can have people from all over the country on the same story circle. So there's different dynamics, I think, that come into play between doing it in person and doing it online. But I think that the important thing is the intention and the attention that's cultivated within the story circle.
Absolutely. And a very important point that you made that's important for all of us to hear again, Juliana, and that is every story circle is an experience. None of the story circles are the same. They're not programs. They're not cookie cutter. What we have to do is lean in and embrace the process. As Juliana was saying, the intentionality and the attention.
Right.
So,
one thing we've had to work on reframing for some of our program managers is they're used to the whole one and done. Like, I've been through that training, I'm trained, I'm good. And Story Circles doesn't fit that traditional model because it's so fluid and adaptive to the people who are there. There are basic principles that once you learn, you can adapt them and integrate them to whatever group of people you have. But we're constantly learning. And one of my favorite parts of Story Circles is that learning and practice, where we come together afterwards and we discuss like what went well, what would, we discuss our pluses and wishes of what we thought went really well, where we created wellness and community, and what we can do better. And continuing to evolve the process, I think, is part of what makes it so dynamic.
Absolutely. And the key there is process. You know, most of us have been educated here in the United States and Western educated people from kindergarten to higher education. And a lot of it's been didactic education, one way. But you know, the experiences that we've all had when we were able to learn collectively and really get involved in process work and making our own choices about our education, you know, and having our own voice. That's when you really experience education in a liberating way. And so we haven't always embraced process, you know, and so that's what the unlearning is. We got to embrace the process and got to trust it. And you don't control the process. You let people tell their stories from their own lived experience. It's not about controlling, and it's not about power over. Two things. It's not about power and control. It's about process.
Right.
That's what's very important. So one of the things, I think what I'm going to do is, Juliana, is like we'll go through how the themes are established, and then let's get to the questions.
Okay.
And then whatever time we have, we'll end up with some of the slides. But main thing is to get those questions.
Yeah, before we move into that, I just wanted to share William's comment. He says the conversation or the dialogue in a story circle creates freedom and liberty within the gathered space. And it's so true. Story circles, the process is all about co-creating that safe, brave space together. So yeah, we can go ahead and talk about the themes, and then I'd love to get to questions. I just wanted to highlight that really fast.
Absolutely. Thank you a lot, Bill. Appreciate that. That liberty piece is so important, that liberation piece. And so how do you get the themes for, you know, so we use the concept called theme-centered interaction. And peers come together who are going to facilitate the story circle for that particular session or sessions, decide what is important. What do you think is important? You know, so they come up with some various themes, but they're not locked in because those themes kind of pivot into the needs of the group. The group may center their stories around a particular theme, but what it does, it jumpstarts the story circle, allows people to begin to focus. You know, like today, if I did a experiential story circle, which we'll get to, maybe we'll do a part 2 to this and do an experiential together. But I was going to say, the theme for our story circle today is, what does it mean to do something when you're afraid? Have you ever done anything that you just was afraid, but you did it anyway? And what was the outcome? And how did it support your recovery? So, but the main thing, the themes are related to self-care, how you take care of yourself every single day. And you see on the slides some other themes. So the themes, you can be very creative. And that's to start the spirit of the story circle. They're going to pivot into lots of other kinds of themes. But it's important for the co-facilitators who are opening the space for the involvement is to have a theme ready and some process questions to generate the involvement of the group. Would you like to add anything here, Juliana? I hope you all can see, everybody can see the themes, right, that we have listed here in the slide?
Yeah, I'm seeing those.
Okay.
I'm assuming everyone else can. I would just say in the development of these themes, a lot of times as we come together as facilitators or co-facilitators, we just talk about what's happening in our own lives, what the things are that are that's coming up for us. We develop questions, and then we sometimes will ask them to each other and just see if the way that we frame the question provokes a story as we answer. So we try to make sure that we're broadening the theme. So sometimes we'll get really specific as we're talking about our own personal situations and developing those themes, but then we try to step back and broaden it back out so that it can be more open-ended as we're taking it into the story circle. And I think also practicing asking those questions to each other and just seeing if we phrase them in a way that elicits a story as we want to respond. And those are just some of the mechanics that you learn over time as a facilitator.
Absolutely. And these themes, you know, it shows I mean, the story circle promotes that community, that you're not alone.
Mhm.
You know, you're not alone. You're in community and everybody's working on their wellness and recovery. You know, so you see these people establish their own wellness goals, how they're going to take care of themselves better, you know, working through trauma, you know, mental health recovery, all those aspects of themes related to recovery, wellness goals, understanding mental health. One of the big pieces in the work that we did in the research, applied research in Ohio that I'm speaking of, wellness management recovery, is we spend a lot of time talking about managing the symptoms. What is symptoms and side effects of medications? And people will talk about their journeys of, you know, managing, you know, the effects of psychotropic medications and how that's been so hard, but how they liberate themselves from those types of effects. And, you know, but to hear the stories of other people helps you to have what you call the coordinating your care with your provider differently. How to speak with your provider, as we say, eye to eye, you know, as opposed to, you know, the top down. So all of that. And then also, you know, in the story circle, it's a celebration. That's where the arts come in. The arts are healing. You know, the arts in our community is healing. So don't, you know, always think about, you know, maybe ask someone, and, you know, it doesn't have to always be planned out. Anybody right now would like to do a song or read a poem or, you know, show a visual art or just a personal reflection, you know, so you can be real creative. So Juliana, let's deal with some of the questions because I'm looking at time. We're at 11:08.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to pull in William's comment. Story circles create wellness and recovery to the facilitators. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And then Stan shared that borrowing from Indigenous practice, we often start with passing around a smudge bowl. It seems to result in greater positivity in the ongoing process. A short prayer and even a minute of silent mindfulness has this effect also. And one of the things I love about story circles is we can bring in these cultural practices and these things, and we can share them with each other, and we can experience things from other cultures that maybe we wouldn't have experienced otherwise. And so absolutely, Stan, we can bring those practices in and we can share them with one another. So just to go back to some of the questions that we had, Allison had a question about, you know, if you have someone who is taking a lot of time, what is a way to help distribute the time evenly? That's my paraphrase of what she was asking.
Right. That's a very important question because we certainly don't want to interrupt anyone. But what we want to do is in the beginning of your story circle, I put together a very simplistic structure. So, because I want you to look at story circles as something that can be implemented right away in your agencies, in your classrooms, in your community-based organizations, in your clinics, in your hospitals, whatever places and spaces where you are educating. I don't like to use the word training anymore. We're scrutinizing the language in mental health, you know, treatment and training and, you know, what is, you know, trying to get away from a lot of that pejorative language. It's just about collective learning and it's about education. It's about building community and real relationships. So when you start your story circle to address that specific question is to make sure you say, let's share the oxygen. Let's make sure we tell our stories, you know, in a way that satisfies your needs and also, you know, contributes to the group. We want to make sure that everyone has time to share their stories. And so as a facilitator, you can just say, thank you very much, Juliana. We appreciate your story. However, we'd like to have other people have an opportunity to share as well. And it works out that way. And so as a facilitator, you know, you're shy about that in the beginning. You know, it's really because you say, oh, I don't want to interrupt anyone. But just think about the fact that you are in charge of the process, you know, in terms of managing the process. And so you can always say, we want to make sure that we get a good collective learning experience and allow someone else to share. So it works out and everybody appreciates that. Because see, what happens sometimes is because you get that good attention and nobody ever asked you about your lived experience before, and you start telling your story and you lose all sense of time. When you just want to tell it to everybody, you just keep going on and on. And it's great. That's just this great, that's the transforming experience, but that's why you have facilitators. So I hope that answered your question.
And Allison, you can let us know if that answered your question. If you have any other questions, anyone else who has questions can drop those into the chat. I did want to go to Lamont's questions. He asked, how do you implement or integrate this into traditional clinical care? What do you bill it as? And what type of care is it identified as? Basic support group? And so that's a number of questions all in one, but basically around how do you integrate this into a traditional clinical care?
Right, that's an excellent question for implementation. And I want to tell you, when we did 23 agencies, maybe even 25, if I'm thinking clearly about a couple other and a couple hospitals, what we were able to do, because the funding came from the state of Ohio, we were able to make sure that all the agencies and hospitals could implement this type of work for billable services for individuals who participated in the story circles, and each individual could be billed. You could bill for services because persons that come into the story circle are also receiving other types of services in the agencies in terms of, I should say wraparound services, as well as individual therapy, participating in other, I should say evidence-based practices like the RAP program and other programs. We didn't try to compete with any programs. We wanted to open a space for peers to be able to engage in any kind of evidence-based practice that they wanted to participate in. So you can build this as individuals who are participating in the story circles, and you can also build it as a group process, but it's not a support group in its essence. Okay, but if your particular state structure says, here's your category, and you think the story circle fits into support group, build it that way. But just don't internalize the story circle as being just what you call a traditional clinical support group, because it's a different structure, it's a different pedagogy. Right. Altogether. But yes, you can build this. This is clinical. That's another, let me just say, as a practitioner, the word clinical is one of those things that divides the we, they, the up, down. You're clinical, I'm not. You got the license from the state, I don't. You're a recipient, I'm a provider. Those are just division language of systems. But Story Circle collapses all of that. Even though we know who we are, we know if you're licensed, a clinician or practitioner or a recipient of services. But when you come into the Story Circle, you're both. You're both a provider of service and you're also a recipient of services. But for the system, in terms of funding and clinical structures, the Story Circle is adaptable to those kinds of funding, billable services. I hope that makes sense.
And we're able to categorize that as needed to try to get the funding. However, we need to get the funding to pay for it. We can kind of work with you on that. But then to Deborah's point, we just don't want to fall into the mindset of it being a traditional.
Right.
So
exactly.
Lamont has a question about slides. I think he's wondering if he can get the slides sent to him.
Yes, absolutely. We can have Niaspris send that out to everyone that's been registered to get a copy of the slides. And also for anyone out there that would like to have some technical assistance in terms of how to implement story circles, contact me. I guess I should put my information in the chat. I will do that. I will put my email in the chat, and we can assist with technical assistance. I'm just going to put my email in there. You have my information.
I'm also dropping my email as well as our overall agency email for
Right.
Poetry for Personal Power, because we'd be happy to help people with the implementation as well. I know Lamont had a few other questions about like funding, the ability to market, to get people to attend. Those are all important parts of the process.
Right. And just know that Juliana and I, Portrait for Personal Power and Confluency Consultants work in collaboration. Portrait for Personal Power has a history of implementing story circles within senior communities, agencies that are focused on trauma in community-based faith communities, in community-based mental health agencies, with youth, with seniors and adults. Okay, so in various contexts. So we work collaboratively, and it's important because that's what story circles promote, is the collaboration of peer and provider. So we model that in the way that we provide technical assistance. And so that way we're aligned with what the tenets of the story circles are. So if you need technical assistance, you just reach out to us and we will assist your organization with implementation of the story circle process.
We've got to watch our time, but I thank everyone for their comments and for their participation. I love all the interaction, and I'll turn back to Deborah to wrap up.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much for everyone. I hope that this has been information that you can use. And Juliana and I it's a pleasure for both of us to be in community with everyone today. You all, this is a critical time, as we all know, of how to make a difference and how to build communities of wellness. We don't need to get more complex. We need to keep it simple. And we can do that through the story circle process. And people don't need programs, they need relationships. And this is what story circle promotes. So I want to wish you all a blessed and peaceful day and a joyous day. And I hope to hear back from you. And as NIASPRS will be sending out the evaluation, and we will also make those slides available. And we want to give a shout out to Poetry for Personal Power, Julianne, and all the wonderful work that they are doing. And you can, I think, Julianne, you put the website in the chat, right? Poetryforpersonalpower.org to see the wonderful work they're doing through resiliency and the arts. So at this point, we're going to end the webinar, and peace and blessings to everyone.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.